When Chris returns, he discovers a prayer card that has fallen from Grandpa's Bible and realizes Grandpa prayed the exact same words Jesus taught to his followers in the Lord's Prayer. Chris asks his grandmother to pray together, and they begin to say the Lord's Prayer. Grandma explains the meaning of each line to Chris and tells him it is the perfect outline for all prayers. We can read about this event from the Bible in Matthew chapter 6. And a life lesson we can learn from this episode of Superbook is that teach us to pray. How Jesus has teach us to pray. Dear friends, Jesus is revealed in the Bible as the Son of God. He was first given the title by Gabriel, who spoke to Mary, saying, "So the baby to be born will be holy, and he will be called the Son of God." Luke chapter 1 verse 25. After Jesus was baptized by John, God said, "This is my dearly beloved Son, who brings me great joy." As the Son of God, Jesus was powerful. Jesus was all powerful on the earth. He healed the sick, cast out demons, walked on water, calmed the sea, and had the authority to forgive sins. We can read about Jesus in the whole Bible and in 4 Gospels. In this episode of Superbook, Teach Us to Pray, we see Elijah too during the transfiguration of Jesus' time. Elijah stood up boldly for God in a time when idolatry had swept his land. After a 3 years drought, Elijah went out to confront the king and his false prophets. Confident of the power of God, Elijah challenged the 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of false god Asherah to show down on Mount Carmel. We can read about Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 18 and 1 Kings chapter 22. And in New Testament we can learn about Elijah in Philippians chapter 4 verse 9. Then we see among the main characters in this episode, we see James. James most likely would have been with the other disciples in Jerusalem when they questioned Peter about entering Cornelius' home. James was the son of Zebedee and the older brother to John. Jesus came to James and John and told them to follow him and be fishers of people. James and his brother John were one of Jesus' 12 disciples. They were nicknamed the Son of Thunders by Jesus. James, John and Peter were called Jesus' inner circle and were the closest to Jesus of all the apostles. James was the first apostle to die as a martyr when he was killed by King Herod Agrippa in AD 44. We can read about James in Matthew chapter 4, Matthew chapter 10, Mark chapter 3, Acts chapter 1, Matthew chapter 4, Luke chapter 9, Mark chapter 5, Luke chapter 8, Mark chapter 14, Matthew chapter 26, Mark chapter 10, Acts chapter 1 and Acts chapter 12. Now let me share about Peter. Peter was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. Peter was fisherman on the Sea of Galilee. When Jesus called Peter to follow him, Peter's life took a completely different direction. He became a fisher of men. Peter was the disciple who climbed out of the boat to walk to Jesus. And he was also the first disciple to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. Peter later became the leader of the emerging church. We can read about him in New Testament. Matthew chapter 16, John chapter 1, Mark chapter 1, John chapter 1, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and so on. Now dear friends, let me share with you about Moses. At God's direction, Moses led the Israelites out of the slavery they suffered in Egypt. After their dramatic escape through the Red Sea, the real adventure of trusting God's provision started. As the leader of Israelites, Moses faced many challenges, some of the biggest which took place upon his arrival to Mount Sinai. We can read about Moses in Exodus chapter 3, Exodus chapter 16, Numbers 20, Deuteronomy 33, and Deuteronomy chapter 34. Now let me share with you about young John. Before Jesus called him to be a disciple, he was a fisherman. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18 through 22, Mark chapter 1, verse 16 through 20. John's relationship with Jesus was so close that he was called the disciple Jesus loved. John wrote the Gospel of John, 1st John, 2nd John, 3rd John, and the Revelation. We can read about this disciple of Jesus, John, in John chapter 13, verse 34 to 35, Matthew chapter 4, verse 18 through 22, Mark chapter 1, 16 through 20, Mark chapter 5, 37, Luke chapter 9, verse 28 and 29, Mark chapter 3, verse 17, John 19, verse 26 through 27, John chapter 20, verse 31, Revelation chapter 1, verse 9 through 11. Dear friends, I hope you are encouraged by listening to the life of God's people present in Teach Us to Pray episode of Superbook Season 4, and also the event present in the Bible that is present in Superbook Teach Us to Pray. Thank you for watching and God bless. Please like, share, comment and subscribe our channel for more videos.